short in syllables, but very heavy in content, so we'll just have to grapple with it. And normally when we talk about this, I use a whole hour, so we are really going to speed through some complicated things, and I believe in you. So we'll just get through it. So ma is a rough kind of translation, and I want to say it's a rough translation because this word doesn't exist in English, and you'll learn why. Some things just don't, we don't do the same things, we don't think about things the same way, so sometimes things just don't translate that well, and this is really one of those words. So we'll be unpacking that quite a bit. So two kind of rough translations would be, one, ma is the simultaneous expression of space and time. Already sounds kind of muddy. And two, maybe more meatier definitions would be, ma is the natural space between two things occurring in a continuity, or the natural pause or interval between two phenomena happening contiguously. Everybody's still lost, right? Yeah, that's great, no problem. So I think sometimes when things are a little ethereal and hard to grasp, we should just get grounded in something. And I think the best thing to get grounded in is the word itself. Is anyone here taking Japanese or Mandarin? Hey, yeah, great. So I'm gonna lean on you just a little. So let's talk about the character, the Chinese character for ma, which is then imported into Japan as kanji. And ma, or kanji in general, are really symbols of ideas too. Originally they would have come to describe something in shape too. They're a little stylized right now, so they're hard to read. But this is the character for ma. So it's not uncommon for characters to be the combination of one or more characters to make a new meaning, and this is no exception. Ma is a combination of two characters. And I want to show you those two characters because I think this will really help us. Bear with me. So we have, together, we have the character for, if you can see it here, this character, which is a gate or a door. Yeah? And can you kind of see how this is a gate or a door? Very stylized, but. And then we have inside this gate or door, originally the character for moon, but in its current writing, it's the sun. But I think noting that these are two possible translations is also worth acknowledging. And I'm going to focus on its original translation of the moon because I'm just more charmed by the moon, what can I say? So, if you were to imagine these two concepts coming together as one, gate and moon or sun really, how do you think you might interpret something like that? Anybody? If there is the moon or the sun inside of a gate or a door. Yeah.
Gate to the moon.
That's great. Yeah, that could be one way of interpreting it. Anybody else? Yeah, absolutely. So what we have here, and that's true. So what we have here is a very physical space, a gate, and then we have something that's an indicator of time. But then we have a third dimension that's not easy to see. So if you all were to imagine, sort of as you were describing, the moonlight maybe trickling through a gap in a door, just try to envision that for a moment. What do you feel when you picture this image of moonlight trickling through a crevice in a door? Yeah.
Well, the lunar calendar is what Chinese people use as to delineate the dates and time. So it's the moon. I mean, it's the gate to time.
That's really spot on. But hold on that one. That is so spot on though. But just to get a feeling, what kind of feeling does that kind of? Sure.
Sometimes at night, like you're in your bedroom and something else is going on outside, but the moonlight's either coming in through the window or light from another room is coming in, and there's really a sense of here and there.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good feeling. That's a good feeling. I can picture what you're saying. Does anyone else have any kind of, how does this make you feel when you think about moonlight trickling through a door? Yeah.
Like the gates of heaven.
Gates of heaven, sure, okay, yeah. There's no wrong, I want everyone to know there's no right or wrong answers. And this is what we'll come to. Any other recollections of something like this that it recalls in your mind? Yes?
I would say warmth.
Warmth, yeah. And I think someone else might say this could be scary to them because there's shadows and you can't see what's beyond it. But But this is the third dimension of Ma that I think is really important, is that's your individual experience. So we have a physical space, a time, day or night, and then our experience of that space and time, coming together to make this very interesting and complex idea of Ma. So we've talked a lot about this idea of these things coming together as a space and a time and your experience. But there's more ways to think of it even still. So if we're looking at, other times I've done this one by a physical door, so please excuse my gesturing to this character, but we have the space we just experienced, or we just talked about, and then we have the space between two beginnings and ends, so we could have a beginning and an end, that space between. And then we also have a start and a finish, but ultimately when we're talking about how the experience comes into this, we're talking about the space in which lives are lived. Right? So this is beginning, this is end, and this is all of the stuff where we actually do things and exist and experience. And so Ma is just this really fuzzy amalgamation of how these things all come together and we make sense of them. So does anyone have any idea about why this kind of emphasis on experience and this kind of sort of changing, a slippery idea of time, what that might have to do with Japanese culture or really East Asian culture? Because sometimes it makes sense, but we just can speculate a little bit, because this is intentionally supposed to be ambiguous. But I just want to throw it out there that there are some kind of tenets that permeate through Japanese and East Asian culture, really, about change and temporal natures and things that I think can really kind of head this behind. Did you have a thought? Yeah. Totally, yeah. So really, if we think about a really oversimplified, please, I'm very oversimplifying it because we have such a short amount of time here. One kind of experience of Buddhism is that the one way or a good way to avoid suffering is to not fight against what comes most natural to this world, and that's change, right? So if you're not worried about what happened here in the past, because really that's done, there's nothing you can do about that. And you're not worried about what's happening in the future because you can't predict that, that's completely out of your control. You're living right here in this moment, in the Ma. Right? So these ideas about change and transition, they're super important in a lot of the art that you see in this quadrant of the museum even. So with that, let's talk about how we actually experience Ma, where we are right now. So anybody who's back there that can't see, please feel free to come up so you can see better, because we're going to talk about this, which is called the Toko no Ma, right? So we're already seeing this word Ma in use here. Does anyone know what a Toko no Ma could be? I'm happy to fill it in, but I'm happy for guesses, sure.
Somewhere to relax or reflect on it.
It's definitely, yeah, it's an intentional space, an intentional alcove, where typically things are displayed. And in this particular Toko no Ma, what kind of space do you see? I'm going to press you hard on a Thursday night. Yeah.
Space between three objects, like a triumvirate.
Yes. Yes. That's definitely an element of space here. Does anyone else have any other interpretations of the space in this space? Let's look at this scroll. What space do you notice in this scroll? I'm sure you all can see some space. Help me out. What do you see in the scroll?
Natural outdoor at night, sea.
Yeah. But so what are you seeing? What are the physical things you're seeing in that scroll? Then how about that? We'll start there. Yeah.
I was going to say, well, there's the image itself, and around it has a frame, and it's a hanging scroll.
That's certainly some Ma. You're talking about Ma. What were you going to say?
The image itself has a lot of negative space in it, perhaps more than positive.
Well, help me expand upon that. What do you mean by negative space?
By negative space, I mean it's blank in a way, but in a way that brings out the elements that do have some kind of design to them, such as the moon stands out more because there's less in the scene, and the tree isn't the center of the image. Even though it's the part that has the most technical line work, you would think it would draw your attention, but it's actually the moon because of how much empty space is actually around it.
Up top. Yes. Yes. So all of this ma created here is so meaningful. And it's funny, I try not to use that word negative space, even though you're completely right. That's exactly how we interpret it. But it's space that's full of possibility, full of energy, full of something, and something that gives meaning to other things, right? So thinking about that in the rest of this space here, where else do you see this kind of ma? This space between intervals. Yeah.
Isn't that the image that's painted on the scroll, kind of like a stylized version of the actual object?
Oh, the flower arrangement.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, we can go back to what we mentioned earlier about this emphasis on change and interest in living in the moment. What in this ma created here by someone who was created for you to experience it, keep that in mind. Someone intentionally created this ma for you. What are you noticing that really speaks to this moment? How are they embracing the moment now? What about some autumn leaves? I mean, there's no pumpkin spice lattes in here, but, they're on their way. They're on their way. And this floral arrangement down here, too, also has acorns and things that you would see in the autumn. And so there's a constant kind of intentional reconciliation of ma as well. So it's not this is something that just happens on its own. You can also influence it. I am right now trying to influence your ma, right? This ma between us, I'm trying to close in it in some ways, right? So actually to that end, let's jump over to these objects. Does anyone know what these objects are?
I think they're tea items.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Does anyone know what happens in a tea ceremony? Oh, I'd really love to show you all someday. That being said, a tea ceremony is a very slow process. Oh, if you know, please do indulge us.
When I was in Japan, we had to sit through one. It was really fun though.
Oh, I love that you phrased it. You had to sit through one.
We did. It took a long, long time. But there's so much care that goes into mixing the matcha, and then just like the process of handing it out. It's all like, I'm sorry, I'm like really tired right now, but
I'm with you.
it's well thought out, it's very traditional, and it's a way of accepting someone kind of into your social circle in a way.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. I'm so grateful for your presence right now as well. So let's talk about ma as relationships as well. Because right now we've been talking about this kind of physical space of ma and interpreting something visual, but let's also talk about the ma that we create all the time and are reconciling with each other all the time. And tea ceremony is a really great way of looking at that. So, as you had said, someone's putting a ton of care into your presence and you're joining them. And in return, you are also expected to give a ton of care as a guest. So there's a host and there's a guest, and everyone comes together and gives their all to this ma to create this really harmonious space between you. And everything is intentional and thought out. For example, has anyone had a friend over lately? Yeah? Friends?
Yeah.
You're nodding hard. What did you do before your friend came over?
Well, I made sure my room was clean.
Totally.
And then when they came, I offered them like snacks and drinks.
Yes, that's exactly it. That's what tea ceremony is all about, really. But I bet you maybe knew your friend to a degree, so you made sure to have snacks that they might like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That
Had
is
some
creating the
Doritos.
ma. You're creating some ma for you and your friend in that space. And every time you do that, you change the ma, and you could also forget that your friend has a seafood allergy, and that might change your ma too. So these are all really important things, and tea ceremony is a really good way of looking at that. And there's another really great expression that I think is good to bring into this conversation here that's very prevalent in tea ceremony. It's called ichigo ichie. And it has kind of a silly translation, as all things do, it's tough. But it translates roughly to one chance, one opportunity, one meeting. And the idea is that moment that you created for your friend there, and this moment that we're sharing now, so let's keep all the time open. Before you met that day, you maybe felt sick, and so the way you spoke to your friend was unique because of the experiences you had that day. Maybe your friend was a little bit tired. Maybe your friend had a Red Bull before she came and she was talking very quickly and you're having a hard time keeping up. These are all things that add to that moment you shared with her. And there is no possibility that that has ever happened before, all things coming together in just this way for you and your friend. and there's no possibility of it ever happening again. For example, I gave a very similar talk last week at noon for an hour, same topic. Let's pretend we were all the same people last week at this exact same time. You all came here, you heard me talk, I said the exact same words. These things are very unlikely, but if they could happen, it would still not be the same, right? It can't be the same. So if we were to do this again next week, before now and then, you all will have changed. I will have changed, the world will have changed. This is one unique, very serendipitous moment that the whole universe had to conspire for us to have. And so it's so important. So we're back to talking about this really specific moment that we're sharing together now. And then, how about this? Can anyone tell me something in the last 12 hours that was remarkable to your day? Someone who's been so shy, please tell me something that happened to you today. Yeah, way in the back, that's what I'm talking about.
I was supposed to meet with my teacher today, but he postponed, so I had to chill for the rest of the day. It was great.
It was great. Awesome, I like to hear that. And that's the exact kind of remarkable encounter that I'm talking about. Does anyone else have an example of something? Yeah.
I rode a bus to get here, but I also brought a bike, and I put the bike on the front of the bus for the very first time.
Oh, it's nerve-wracking, right?
I was very, yes, nervous. And I held the whole bus up for a while until I figured it out.
But you figured it out.
Yeah.
And for some, in your own way and in your own way, that experience has changed your day, better or worse, and you've brought that experience to us now. So all of us have had these things happening to us all day today. So how special it is that we're all sharing this unique Ma together now. And that's Ichigo Ichie. And that's also another way of looking at Ma and how it's kind of this malleable thing that can be influenced, but also is just going to keep going on, right? So I don't want to be rude, but this talk I normally do in an hour. We're doing okay. All right. So we're going to look at how one artist in this gallery or in the museum really is interested in this concept of Ma, and we're going to go experience that for ourselves with that artist, sort of. So if you all wouldn't mind, we can come around to this next gallery over, and before we go into the next door, which I will show you, let's just take a pause before we enter. If you can all bear with me. I'll pull.
I do that to sort of like helps people like correct what they call them, they know there's something out there, so they're not totally sticker shock.
dinosaurs. I had a chest from the Ming Dynasty. And inside the picture,
those in less than 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Y'all will be closing in 5 minutes.
Pink.